Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Heather Venegas, and this is King County Recovery Conversations, and I am thrilled to be joined today by Mikel Kowalcyk.
Hi.
Hey, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for asking.
Mikel, could we start with your personal story of recovery as a place to kick us off and move into all the things from there?
Yeah. So I would call myself a woman in recovery. That journey began in 2006, and I was able to find recovery by ways of the court system. I graduated a Snohomish County Drug Court program, and while in that program, I went back to school, and I got my bachelor's degree in human services over the years, even past the point of graduation. But that gave me just a new start in life and a new career path. I moved to Washington in 2003 from New Jersey, where I spent my first 32 years. And I thought I would come out here and start my life over. And it didn't quite work out that way. Wherever you go, there you are. So I brought myself with me with all my trauma and all my problems. And that continued for a few years in Washington until I got things together.
Isn't that always the way? We absolutely do geographics and try different things to have that new beginning, only to realize, oh my God, I brought myself with me. I love when we were talking yesterday, preparing for this episode, how you talked about burning through the cash that you had and then burning down the house or burning your apartment.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. When I left New Jersey, a 5-year relationship had just ended and we owned a home together. So we sold the house and I made a decent amount of money from that and had no debt and drove 3,000 miles cross country with a pile of money in the bank and, a retirement savings account and a CD in the bank. And it took less than 2 years for me to burn through that money. And while I was using, that's when I had some legal involvement and I'd been arrested a couple times. And the first time that I was arrested was for a DUI. And I was living in an apartment in Kirkland, and while burning through the money and not behaving appropriately, I ended up burning down my apartment. So I burned through all my money. I burned down my apartment. The Red Cross put me up for a couple weeks. I relocated to Linwood because I thought Linwood would be a new start because Kirkland didn't work and New Jersey didn't work. I kept trying to find a new place where things were going to work better. And while I was in the hotel with the Red Cross, I missed the court date for the DUI. So the next time I was pulled over, I had a warrant, and then I got new charges in Snohomish County, which actually I can look back and say that led me on my current journey of recovery.
So you ended up in the right place.
Yes, but did not know that at the time.
Exactly. And I remember you also said that you didn't realize when you made that transcontinental journey that you would be going someplace that actually had more drugs than where you had been before.
Yeah. Seattle is like, whoa, compared to the little town I'm from in Asbury Park. Although, it's a party town. It's like if you use drugs, there's like a bullseye painted on you, and people just know, right? And yeah, it's easy to find if you're looking or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So when you got into recovery, you went to school. Mm-hmm. What were you studying?
I actually wanted to be a probation officer, and the human services route was a little easier than the criminal justice route as far as degrees. And while I was in school and doing internships and work studies, I started working at youth shelters and doing street outreach and just kind of ended up in a kind of harm reduction, case management, jail release program. My last internship was at Volunteers of America in Everett, and that was probably the most rewarding. And so by doing those internships along with my degree, it led me to my current path of lead and harm reduction and outreach. So over the years, going to school, because I didn't have any experience in this field, right? Like I was in the liquor business and the restaurant business and went to wine school at Windows on the World on the Trade Center, right? I was a wine salesman. So like it was a career path and I did really well in it until drugs got in the way of that. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to start your life over and find a new career and find something that you can be successful in, or that I could. And I actually used a little booklet called the something search, and I filled out a little booklet with questions and it directed me towards a self-directed search was a little booklet towards probation officer. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool? Because I had been on probation for 4 years. It was scheduled for 5, but I got off a little early for good behavior. And I wanted to be a probation officer that understood addiction, because there's so many people involved in the criminal justice system with addiction issues that are addressed criminally instead of addressing the addiction itself.
And from that path, you ended up at the company that you're with today.
Correct.
Could you tell us, how did that happen? How did you fall into lead?
I was doing actually, I was one class short of my bachelor's degree for a couple of years because I was struggling staying clean. So it took me 2 extra years to get my degree because I wasn't quite ready. And I thought once I had my degree, I should use it and work in the field. So in March of 2014, when I graduated from Western, I happened to be playing softball on a clean and sober softball team in Snohomish County. And one of the people on my team worked at Reach. It just happened, right? It was my first year back playing in that clean and sober softball league. And Brenda Frazier, I can thank her for my 10 years at Reach, because I said, hey, I just got my degree. And she was like, you should apply at Reach. And I'm like, what's Reach? I actually didn't know, and I had to look it up and then realized it was part of Evergreen Treatment Services. I actually didn't know at the time that I applied. So my paycheck's Evergreen Treatment Services, which is a great company. I just do the social work part of that out of Belltown, although we've expanded, and now we have 5 different offices. But right place at the right time, and it's kind of like recovery. When things are going well and you're living right, things line up. That's my belief, right? If I'm fighting it or I'm trying too hard, then it's probably not right. And if I just kind of go with the flow and pay attention to things, right, next right indicated thing, it led me on the right path.
That's fantastic. I saw like a meme today that I guess I posted years ago, and it was like, if the door doesn't open, it isn't your door. And I was like, oh, yes.
Don't try and knock it down.
Still.
Yes.
All these years later, I forget that sometimes. But it's awesome. So true, right? Where that flow is, where it's just that grace, I think, of our right path, right steps, right connections, people at the right time. I love that. And playing softball, isn't that great?
Yes.
So when you started at Reach, it was almost a brand new program, right?
Yes. It was, so LEAD, Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion, was a pilot program that started in 2011. And from 2011 to 2015, it was a pilot. And they did it for a few years, and then University of Washington did the research study on it. So in 2014, when the research study was being conducted, LEAD actually expanded from one neighborhood of Belltown to all of downtown Seattle. So I was the first hire of the expansion of LEAD in May of 2014, where it went throughout downtown, all of West Precinct.
And that program actually has been replicated all over the country and internationally as well.
That's correct. There's a LEAD national division too. So PDA, Purpose, Dignity, Action, formerly known as Public Defenders Association, project manages LEAD. So we're one of the contracted providers that does the direct service and the case management for all of the LEAD participants. There's now other organizations also that are doing LEAD. POCAM, People of Color Against AIDS Network, Ideal Option, Community Passageways, and Co-LEAD. So we can reach more people.
That's amazing. Could you give us a brief overview of the types of things that you do and that you provide for people?
Yeah. So my role has changed over the years. I started as a lead case manager and had a caseload and worked directly with clients and got them to whatever goals they wanted to reach. So reach is it's about what the client needs, wants, and client autonomy and client choice, right? So it's not any of our jobs to tell people what they should do, but use motivational interviewing and a harm reduction model to get people to identify goals and help them get there. Like, hey, I want a job and I want an apartment. Okay, that's great. How are you going to get a job if you're using all day, every day? So it's a way to address other behaviors and get clients to identify the behaviors and make the choice to work on them to get to the goal that they want, which is usually housing or income or stability. So we really use motivational interviewing to get clients to their goals. And there's a lot of barriers for clients to reach the goals, right? Our systems aren't set up well for people to navigate, especially when using drugs, when there's mental health issues, when there's criminal legal issues going on. The systems are hard to navigate. I did that for a couple of years, and then I was a screening and outreach coordinator for LEAD, which was the highlight of my time at Reach because I was excited to work with law enforcement. And I got to ride around with Seattle Police Department, Department of Corrections, and actually work with law enforcement that knew all the folks in the community and would refer them to services. So you could get relationships with law enforcement aren't always good, right? Especially if they're stopping you for something you're not supposed to be doing.
Right.
But to have an opportunity of yes, I'm doing this thing wrong, and you might have some underlying conditions and might need some help, and get a referral to LEAD. So it was great being that point person for LEAD and being that first face that a client met, tell them about the program and enroll them, and then introduce them to a case manager. So I did that for 5 years in the West Precinct. And then in 2020, I was able to get promoted to supervisor to supervise screening and outreach coordinators. And that, there was a global pandemic. It was COVID. Seattle looked very different. There were encampments everywhere. People were sheltering in place. Services were closed. It was really hard for this community, right? Probably across the world, but particularly in Seattle, the city looked very different. So I thought it was the right time to support a team to do that work. And in 2020, Evergreen Treatment Services went under a reorg, and I moved into the outreach domain. So LEAD is in the community justice domain. So now we have 4 domains. We have integrated care, housing, outreach, and community justice. And I was in the outreach domain, which made sense because screening and outreach coordinators went out into the field to find referrals, get referrals from law enforcement. And in the outreach domain with outreach workers now, that's the first contact, right? Because with LEAD, most of the referrals come from law enforcement.
Right.
With outreach, we're often the first people to meet folks living outside at an encampment. Businesses call us to respond to people in front of their doors, or we have a contract with the Friends of the Waterfront, and we have an outreach worker that responds to anything that happens on the waterfront. So it's just nice to kind of be that first contact with someone outside, develop a relationship, figure out what program they're eligible for or how you can get them what they need, right? If they need housing or a shelter or benefits or a job or a bus ticket back home to their family, outreach is a pretty great resource for folks living outside.
Absolutely. How else would someone who's in an encampment without a car and without money for the bus and all the things, like be able to access
Right.
that type of services, or that like just huge resource of knowledge that you provide of all the different types of things that are possible.
Yes.
What an amazing,
it's pretty great
incredible
supporting a
service.
great team to have like all the skills they need to help in any situation in Seattle.
And so on your team, you have people that have different expertise.
Correct.
So that there's someone that does kind of each part. So together you can address all the different needs.
Yes. And Reach tends to hire people with lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
They've done that for 25 years, long before it was a thing. And so we have folks like Andrew on the Waterfront is an expert at getting someone into a shelter or getting them a job, right? Or helping them get into treatment. And then I have a team, Alex and Ashley, who are in the Chinatown International District, who know everyone in that community. They know the business owners. They know the lady at the nail salon. People call, they do trainings, they do Narcan trainings. Right. They went to the spring clean and helped clean the garbage off the streets last weekend. So just like being a part of a neighborhood.
Right, being part of the community.
Yes, so I get to cover Waterfront, Chinatown, Rainier Beach, and Beacon Hill right now. So because the city moved into districts. So it's kind of hard. Pioneer Square is in District 1, downtown's in District 7, Chinatown to Rainier Beach is District 2. So we have to do what's contractually required, but our goal and our mission is like helping people where they are, and that we do that best in a neighborhood model.
And right now we're recording in Pioneer Square.
We are.
Which district? District 1?
District 1.
Yeah, right where we are. It's all around us.
Yeah.
So yesterday when we were talking about this incredible work that you and your teams are providing, and the other community partners that you mentioned, like Ideal Options and just everyone. Yeah. And this incredible crisis that you're coming up against with the fentanyl crisis. And what that means is you try and connect with people and create that bond and be able to help them navigate and actually get to access some of the resources and services and things that you can connect them with. But there's some setbacks because of the type of drug that fentanyl is. Could you share a little bit of that with our audience?
Yes. To be fair, I'm not a substance use disorder professional.
No.
A lot of experience working in the field. And what I've noticed with this current drug trend, right? Yeah. We went through a crack epidemic. Meth was really prevalent for a couple years, still out there. Yeah. And heroin was its own beast. But when people used heroin, they could use and then get a few things done. They could make it to an appointment. They could go see a doctor. They could fill out housing paperwork. So you had windows of opportunities once someone was well. They could make it to an assessment and get on methadone or Suboxone or go to detox or whatever their desired goal is. With fentanyl, one, it is so cheap. It's about $1 a pill. And it only lasts about 20 minutes, right? So there's no window of opportunity where someone isn't consumed by their drug use once they're addicted to fentanyl. So it's everywhere. It's flooded our streets. You need such a small amount of fentanyl to get high, right? Or get well or whatever, get rid of the pain. And so it's easier to get a ton of fentanyl across a border than like a pile of powder, right? Like you need such a small amount of it to make these pressed pills that are all over Seattle.
So if you've got 20 minutes,
yeah, it's not a long time
before someone is going to be, consumed with, getting my next fix, taking my next pill, whatever, smoking it, whatever they're doing. That must be so challenging to try and reach them and drive across town to wherever the thing is.
Yeah. So that's what's great about Reach is that it is a street-based outreach. All the case management programs, our outreach team, we are in the field meeting clients. So we're not expecting a client to like stop using, come to our office, do a bunch of paperwork. Like we're literally carrying paperwork out into the encampment.
Right.
We're throwing them in the car. I shouldn't say throwing them, but we're giving them a ride to their appointment. Like really, it takes a lot of time and energy with those small windows, right? But you should see a client's face as you're like driving away from everything they know, right? There's clients in encampments that a single female that has a dog. She feels very safe in her tent in that encampment. She has a dog. She knows the community and everyone that lives around her, and she's afraid to leave it. Right? Bad things happen when you leave your tent. So sometimes it's really hard to convince people, like, this is going to be good for you and you should come with me and leave everything and everywhere that you feel safe, right? There's so much underlying trauma and things that have happened to people. There's so much to work on just to get someone to an appointment, to DSHS, to Social Security, to a housing appointment, to a doctor appointment. Yeah. So it's important to deliver services where they are as best you can, which is another thing that Evergreen Treatment Services did. We have a treatment in motion program going right now where there's a mobile methadone dispensary, right? And it starts being parked here in Pioneer Square from 6 to 8:30 in the morning. And then it drives to Belltown outside of Public Health from 9 to 12 so that people don't have to go super far, right? People can receive medication in the community that they live in. And then we have our clinic in Soto, and we have a clinic in Renton and one in Olympia. But as far as Seattle goes, there has to be many different options for people, right? Because Suboxone doesn't work very well with fentanyl. So when we had heroin, I swear, like cartels know and change the drugs and the drug supply because we find ways to combat them. So with heroin, everyone was able to take Suboxone and not be able to get high and really reduce their heroin use until they found a place they were happy, right? Either not using it all or using a lot less than they were. And Suboxone doesn't work on fentanyl. Fentanyl stored in your fat cells. If you have like a trace of fentanyl in your system and you take Suboxone because you don't want to feel sick, you're instantly kicked into withdrawals. So Suboxone doesn't work for fentanyl. Methadone has been proven to work really well. The DEA highly regulates methadone. Right, which is fair. And we're really hoping that there's some relaxation on some of these rules because if you can only start dosing someone at a small amount, it's not enough for the amount of fentanyl that they're using, right? So it takes a little while to get that ramped up to a level that is the same amount of fentanyl they were using, right? Where they're not feeling sick, they're able to make appointments, get a job, maintain housing, that kind of stuff.
There's just so much to all this.
Yeah.
And as we're talking about it and just all the barriers and challenges and things that are a part of helping people that are living this every day right here in this neighborhood and all around us, and providing the best possible options and care that we can. One thing I was really struck with is you were talking about how much you love your job and that you just celebrated your 10-year anniversary and you got the plaque and how you've had conversations about considering doing something else, but yet you love this work that you do. And I was really thinking about, how much that just shines a light on your passion and your commitment and your purpose. And what do you do, Michael, to fill yourself back up so that you can continue to walk with people in this path that you're walking?
Yeah. Well, work for a really good organization that believes in self-care, promotes it. And so I get 2 massages a month. My agency pays for part of one of those, right? So it's a good compensation extra thing at work. But I do 2 massages. I have a women's group, and we meet twice a month, and we do recovery stuff. And I have a weekly meeting with all my support people that I attend. I love to travel. I get enough paid time off to be able to do that. My dream is to get on an airplane 5 times a year. It's even if it's a long weekend or if it's just Las Vegas, but it's important to live life. We really don't know how long we're going to be here. I don't feel like I wasted any of my life because everything that I did contributes to who I am today. And I have a lot of experiences that actually I can help other people with because of them. So no regrets, and I really want to live life to the fullest. So it is important to have a great work-life balance. I didn't always have that. I think new people in recovery, right, don't have great boundaries. So I was an excellent employee, maybe an overachiever. And as I get older, things are much better balanced these days.
That's wonderful. So I'm just being mindful. I'm not sure exactly when we started. I'm being mindful of the time and a couple of the questions I want to make sure I ask. And so I'm going to put them both out, and then maybe you can weave it through. So one thing I want to ask is like, what do we need? Yeah. If money was no object, or, coming up and creating a law or whatever it might be, like what would you try? What would you recommend? What do you think might be helpful to the situation that we're talking about? And could you share a couple of your client stories that you shared with me, and just what gives you hope? Yeah. What gives you hope today? How do you get up every day and do this again?
Right. I guess in a perfect world, I would like for the definition of recovery to be very broad.
Yes.
And for systems to not fight each other, whether it's compliance-based, abstinent-based, court-ordered, harm reduction versus recovery versus abstinence. When all these systems really want the same thing. They want people to be healthy and happy and part of the community and contributing to it instead of taking away from it. So it would be nice if there was a variety of services available, and that we didn't all have to fight for the same pot of money, right? There's buckets of money. There's city and county and federal and grants and private donations, and right. It's really difficult to fund good programs, and I've seen good programs come and go because they lost funding. I was able to receive a grant called Access to Recovery. So once I went to treatment and got out, I had a $1,900 grant, so I didn't have to worry about how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to put gas in my car? How am I going to pay my rent for the next couple of months, right? Because there's a lot of energy that should be divided to recovery, right? And getting better so that you can sustain that and carry it forward for years and contribute back to society. There's not a lot of programs today where, like, if someone at an encampment wanted to stop using and, get a job and a house and a car and get back in touch with their family, there's not a lot of programs that support that. There was many years ago a DOTSA, right? Like there was grants and money for people as an incentive to recover and for them to be able to recover. And there's not much of that these days.
And especially since the data shows that if we can provide those types of foundational supports in early recovery, people stay in recovery. And can live thriving lives and be of service and contribute in the world like you are today. So bringing something like a contemporary DOTSA or access to recovery. Correct. All right, keep going.
People need a place to go, right? So I would say if there was like 3 things, it would be a place for people to just be, right? Especially folks that are unhoused. If you don't want to see homeless folks on your street corners, give them a place to go, right? Because right now it's our streets because they don't have a home. So there's not a lot of places for people to just hang out. There's a few, there's Compass Center and there's some enhanced shelters, but there's our library, right? But there's not places where people just go and be in community with each other. So just space, right? There used to be a day center in Seattle. It closed probably 11 or 12 years ago. It was down on 3rd Avenue. There just aren't those kind of spaces. There's niche ones like Chief Seattle Club, right? So there's niche ones, but there's not just a place for everyone to go and be safe. So definitely spaces, more shelter, right? Everyone's not ready for housing, right? There's some things that, maybe they want to work on their drug use. Maybe they need some mental health treatment. Maybe they have some legal stuff or some fines or whatever. Like there needs to be something in between the streets and housing for some people, right? There's some people that are able to go right inside, but there's not, the only transitional housing is clean and sober, right? And clean and sober is not where everyone is able to be at this time or can get in 30 days.
Right.
And there's not a lot of oversight on clean and sober housing, right? Like you set up a nonprofit, you write the rules, there's a lot of money to be made and people to profit off of people in recovery that get out of treatment. You pay a deposit to move in and you pay a month's rent ahead of time. And if you slip and relapse or lapse, you're out and they keep all your money, right? So the only transitional housing available is clean and sober. And that doesn't work for everyone. So it'd be nice if there was some transitional housing that wasn't permanent supportive. So permanent supportive housing is great. Tiny home villages are great. Enhanced shelters are great. We have a lot of congregate shelters, which the city has a lot of set-aside spaces for when there's removals and people have to leave their spot. They're offered shelter, but often those shelters don't match their needs, right? It's a couple, they have a dog, they have a lot of stuff, right? You can go to this shelter, but you can't go with your partner. You can go to this shelter, but it's a cubicle and you don't have your own space and you can only bring one bag, right? There's a lot of rules for each one of those. So it's nice to have a variety of shelter, transitional housing, including for harm reduction, not just clean and sober, and just different pathways to housing.
Can you share some of the...
client stories?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I can't use names or anything.
No, of course.
They'll know who I'm talking about. But my
secret code.
Yeah, my very first client in 2014, came with a lot of trauma, right? And that's what I've learned, I think, working here for the last 10 years is that it's important to not look at a person and be like, what's wrong with you? Like, no one should ever think that about a human, right? It's not what's wrong with you. It's somebody's kid. It's, they have a mother and a father and a brother, sister, whatever. They're somebody's family. And the question should be, what happened to you, right? Like, what happened to you that these are the choices that you're making today, right? It doesn't mean that people don't make choices that aren't good and don't have negative consequences, but there's usually a precursor or pre-story with some trauma that, causes people to cope and behave in ways that the public doesn't always find appropriate. And we tend to criminalize that behavior. And a lot of it's based in poverty as well, right? So I meet this young man. I say that because he's younger than me. And he came with a lot of trauma, and he just gotten arrested, got a lead referral, so a diversion, so he didn't have to go to jail. But he considered going to jail instead because he thought, if I go to jail, I get to stop using for a few minutes, right? Or a day or two, right? And there's a bed, and there's a TV, and a bathroom, and a shower, and 3 meals, right? So it's a sad place to be in when you think jail sounds better than what you're doing. And instead, he took the opportunity and got into lead program, and I did his intake, and I said, what do you want, And he's like, first thing he said is, I want my kids back in my life. I'd like some mental health, treatment, diagnoses, therapists, and I'd like to either get on methadone or go to treatment. And I'm like, and I said, which one do you prefer? And he's like, whatever you can do first. And back in the day, Brenda used to work and get people enrolled into a treatment program. And someone I knew from recovery. So like I called Brenda, we were able to get him into treatment pretty fast. And and recovery is not linear, right? The goal is always to move people towards recovery. Recovery does not necessarily mean clean and sober and abstinent, right? There's different versions of that. And over the years, like I watched this young man struggle with mental health, right? Just like these underlying issues that we're not all taught as kids, right? Like how to cope, right? How to deal with your anger, how to deal with feelings. My house, we didn't have a lot of talks about feelings, right? Like I still look at a feelings chart wheel, right? To identify some of the things I'm feeling, right? So our participants, need help identifying and coping. And this young man attempted treatment several times, finally figured it out, and, ended up graduating from the program. We helped him get a job, and he started like cleaning the streets in Seattle. And now he's a peer in the field and makes more money than I do, right? So like you just never know when you meet someone, the journey that they're going to be on. And I'm honored to be a witness to clients' journeys.
It's amazing. And I love how, that full circle has happened for you and is happening for your first client.
Yep.
It's a beautiful thing.
It is.
It's amazing where we can go and what we can do if we're just willing to lay down what we think we know and try something new.
Yes.
And surrender. Thank you so much, Michael, for being here today.
Thank you.
For our last word, what would you like people to know about substance use and mental health, people that are living outside, the people we see in our community that can really use our support and services and compassion? What would you like people to know?
I think most importantly is to not judge a human being by their situation. Like a person is not a homeless person. They're a person who's experiencing homelessness, right? Like there's things that happened that cause people to be outside, unhoused, unwell, right? So like just remembering that that's somebody's child.
Absolutely. Yep. We use that phrase a lot too, that someone's child, someone's father, someone's sister, someone's best friend, someone's everything.
Yeah. They're all worthy. As long as there is breath, there is hope.
Yes. And you are a hope spreader. I love that. Me too. I love being an agent for hope and possibility. It's a really wonderful thing. So as we transition out of this episode of the podcast, I'd love to thank Mikel Kowalcyk for joining me today and for being here. And I'm just so grateful for you and all the people on your team and all the other partners that are doing this amazing work in our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I hope your ideas of things that would help are coming to pass soon and quickly. In the near future, KCRC, King County Recovery Coalition, will be holding a joint coalition meeting with the Snohomish County Recovery Coalition on Friday, June 28th from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. at the Shoreline Community College. Everyone is welcome. Love to have you join us. We're going to have a guest speaker and food and fun and networking and all kinds of things. And if you'd like to come celebrate recovery with us, we will be returning to T-Mobile Park on Sunday, September 15th for Recovery Day at the Mariners. You could go to kcrecovery.org to find out about that event and others. And we start right here in Pioneer Square and have a rally and march to the game, and there's so much fun. So thank you so much, Orbit Audio and everyone, for all your support to make this podcast possible. Thanks.